In Ukraine, it's afternoon. That's where Joseph Lindsley is. Hello to you, Joseph. I'm wondering if, with the war going on, were the people of Ukraine as consumed with the news of the Queen as we were here?
Yeah, Bob, good afternoon. And actually, yes. And I think some of that tells you about sort of the Ukrainian psyche. There's a great sense of empathy, I think, in this culture. And there's really a lot of respect for Britain and all the support that the UK has offered. And I would say the Queen's death is a moment probably for the whole world to reflect on leadership, especially at this moment when the world is in some kind of world war and when there really is a need for that type of leadership. And I just returned to the morning train to Lviv a few hours ago, and a great Ukrainian friend here, she said I couldn't say her name on air, but she said to me, she was sad. She said, "We are sad about the Queen, but we are not so sad as losing Boris Johnson." So even though Boris Johnson is still alive, the Ukrainians really miss having Boris as the leader. They hope that Liz Truss will carry on what he did. But there was a really deep connection between Boris Johnson and Zelenskiy, between Boris and the Ukrainian people. But that, despite that, I think there is, even looking at Twitter, a lot of Ukrainians have been posting, how they missed, they're sad about the Queen's death. And I think part of that is that you see with the, as we look at the tributes to the Queen, the stability that she gave British society. And in 1971, when she visited France, the French foreign minister told The Economist that he was a bit jealous of Britain because they had this very difficult mixture of democracy and stability thanks to Queen Elizabeth. And even the country of Georgia, which is across the Black Sea from Ukraine, they also have suffered a lot through Soviet times. Russia controls 20% of that country to this day. And there's a big movement there to bring back their monarchy. There's the idea that if you had a monarch, and maybe they're thinking of someone like Queen Elizabeth, it sort of gives your nation protection amid all the turmoil. And so, yeah, it's a day for a lot of reflections on what kind of leadership the world needs.
And the Queen once dressed in the colors of the Ukraine flag not long after the war started. That must have been appreciated over there.
Yes, and also now King Charles, but a few months ago, Prince Charles, I think back in April, he visited the Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral in London and was doing all he could to volunteer. The Queen actually made an undisclosed sum, but some donation to Ukrainian relief efforts. And so, yeah, and this is the British people, like the American people, have stood with the Ukrainians, and the Queen embodies that. But I think it's also, it really is, it's a time to think about leadership and what kind of leadership the world needs. And I had some small connection to, the world of Queen Elizabeth and British governance. I briefly worked for a British peer and baron. His name is Charles Lord Williams. And I would go to London. I was doing research for him. And I would go to London or Wales, and I would have tea with him and his wife. And his wife, the Lady Jane Williams, was Winston Churchill's last private secretary from 49 to 55. And, of course, Churchill was Queen Elizabeth's first prime minister. Liz Truss was her 15th. And the woman I worked for, Lady Jane, she was portrayed in the show The Crown. I don't know if you watched The Crown.
Sure.
About Queen Elizabeth, really. Mm-hmm. And there was a scene with the London fog in Churchill. And they had Churchill's secretary was portrayed in this scene. Clearly, to me, it was based on Lady Williams. But as I know from my own Hollywood experience with the show The Loudest Voice About My Life, they make up a lot of stuff. So in that episode, Churchill's secretary dies in the London fog. That never happened. In fact, Lady Williams is still alive. Her son is the Archbishop of Canterbury, who will preside over the Queen's funeral in a few days. But from Lady Williams, I heard all these stories of Churchill. And I've been thinking a lot about that while I've been here in Ukraine, on what type of leader he was and how he, especially through his friendships in World War II, friendships even with the Soviets, but also with the Americans, how he was able to use those friendships to work for victory. And I see so much of that in the relationships with, especially with Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky. That type, how through French, and even if you look, Bob, at the tributes of, say, President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama to the Queen, I think if you read between the lines, there are very few people those leaders can speak with about their real burdens. It's like being the president of the United States is a lonely thing. And when I read today the tributes of President Obama and President Bush to the Queen, I imagine that they had a real friendship with her because talking one-on-one, they could share their real burdens and fears and how difficult it is to govern nations in a dangerous world.
Yeah, that's what everybody has pointed out about the Queen, that she certainly was regal and the picture of dignity and stability, but apparently you could get to a very one-on-one human relationship or conversation with her.
Yeah, and I think it was especially important for world leaders. And this is maybe this is a good thing about the British system, but it's difficult. The British comedian Stephen Fry said a few years ago, imagine if, and this is when Donald Trump was president, he said, imagine if every Tuesday Donald Trump had to go to the palace and bow before the king or queen. It would change you. It introduces a type of humility, and so he said, there's something nice about that system, and I think. And that's one reason why I think Ukrainians really, when you look at Britain, you're like, oh, it's a stable democracy where, Ukraine is fighting for its very existence. This is, I would say that in these next days, it's a reflection on leadership and what kind of leadership countries need, so we don't have such horrible situations like we're facing here, like what I've seen the past 2 weeks of traveling Ukraine.
And what will happen with the monarchy going forward. Joe Lindsley in Ukraine, always fascinating to chat with you. Have a safe weekend, and we'll connect Monday.
Thank you, Bob.